Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to start work on a still life in soft pastel. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that that's pretty strange for me because normally I'm working from photo reference. So it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to work from life, and I'm really looking forward to having a go at this and being a bit more experimental. So if you'd like to work along, I've just released the first part of this where I actually show you how to create your own still life composition, but I will release the photo references of this composition on my Patreon channel, so you can go there and download the high resolution images if you want to work along on this exact piece with me. But I do encourage you to go and have a look at that first video where I give you all the tips for setting up your own composition, and I'm hoping that lots of you will have a go at your own ideas. But this video is going to be all about how I sketch it out from the start, and I'm using Pastelmat paper, and I'm going to do my sketch just directly onto the paper because I'm going to use some willow charcoal sticks. And if I'm nice and light with this, it means I can make adjustments as I go. Also, my soft pastel sticks will cover over this quite easily in the painting stages, so I don't mind too much if my line drawing is a little bit messy. So I'll take you right from the start, and hopefully I can share the entire process with you and inspire some of you to have a go at your own still life. I hope that you enjoy this. If you do, please do hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. And also consider checking out my Patreon channel where you'll find extra help for this project and lots of other tutorials. So the first thing I want to do is to start and plot in some guidelines, look for some of the negative spaces within the piece. And I picked up my pastel pencil just to do this part, and then I ended up just continuing with the pastel pencil because I could make my lines very light. And then I could also use the pencil to do a little bit of measuring with, which I'm going to show you in a bit more detail now. So I'll try and demo here what I'm actually doing to help me measure this out. This is pretty much the view that I can see from my stool as I'm drawing. And the trick is to use the pencil to try and help measure things. So you want to hold your arm out in a straight line, as far away from your body as possible, and keep it like that. Then I'm using the pencil to measure how far it is from the bottom of the tea canister to the edge of the desk. So it's a good idea to try and start off with the tallest item in the composition. So it's about there on the pencil if I hold my arm out in a straight line. Then can you see that the actual height of the canister is roughly the same? Then the height of the rest of the composition is roughly the same as well. So I can see from doing that I've got to split the height of the composition into thirds, and that the canister will fit in that middle third. And once you get one item placed, then you want to use that one item to measure everything else off, but the key is to get one item in the right place and then go from there. So that's the basic method of using your pencil to measure with, and as long as you keep your arm straight and as far away from your body as possible, so keep that arm straight so that you're always measuring the same distances. And then really the areas that I'm looking for first are the biggest areas. So the fabric and how it sits down over the desk is going to really help me to place the objects on the fabric, because although I don't have a grid or anything, I'm sort of treating this piece of fabric a bit like a grid, in that if I can get the large shape of it marked in on the composition and then place that tea canister in the right place, then I should be able to measure absolutely everything off of those objects. So I like a still life with a bit of fabric in it, as it gives you a basis on which to place your items. So just figuring out the width of the canister now, and I'll show you that same technique again. Similarly here, to get the width of the canister, So again, arm in a straight line from your body. Use the pencil then to measure the width of the canister. And if you remember, my composition cuts off about here, so it comes down in a straight line around here. So the width of the canister, and I just want to judge how far across that would be. And this distance from the canister to the edge of my drawing is about 1.5 or 1 3/4 of the width of the canister. So I don't even have to use the pencil to measure absolutely everything, because the idea is once you get one item in roughly the right place, then you should be able to use that item to measure everything else against. So really concentrate on the first item. Usually I go for the biggest or the tallest item within the composition. And in this case, I'm really making use of the folds of fabric and the way they lie across the desk, as they really do split up the composition into more manageable chunks. So you can see I'm holding my pastel pencil really loosely, and that's really to encourage me to keep it loose and not go into any detail. The closer to the lead that you hold the pencil, the more likely you are to get into minor detail, and you don't want to do that early on. You want to lean nice and lightly. Really don't lean hard, just ghost the images in to begin with, so that you can easily cover over or adjust things. And don't be afraid to do lots of adjusting. I'm spending just a long time looking at the whole composition, not making a huge amount of marks very quickly at this stage, really just measuring in my head and trying to figure out where things go. So I make a start on the teapot. I've tried to have a bit of a measure there, but as I said, don't be afraid to make adjustments at this early stage. I didn't feel like I had put the teapot far enough to the right, so I just had another go at it, and don't worry about your first lines still being visible. If you're going to work in soft pastel, or maybe you're going to work in oil paints or acrylics, it really won't matter. Those lines will all get covered up in the painting stages. So don't be afraid to make mistakes and make adjustments as you go. That's the whole idea. But if you lean nice and lightly to begin with your first marks, then there's plenty of room for adjustments. And as you'll see closer to the end, when I'm a bit more sure of the perspectives and where I have everything placed, then I start to come in with a heavier line just to make it a bit more definite. So this is a great way to practice your drawing skills. A little bit of drawing from life is such a good way to improve your drawing. And don't worry if you don't have great success the first times that you do this. It's definitely not easy. Try to set up your easel and your stool or chair in one spot, and then hopefully when you sit down on the same spot, or maybe put a marker on the floor where you stand if you don't sit down, something just to keep you in roughly the same place so that you can view it from the same angle each time. But don't worry if it goes a little bit askew. It's all really good practice for your eye. And it's something that I don't get to do often enough. I've really enjoyed working on this so far. And I'm going to be working in soft pastel for the finished colour work. And of course with soft pastel, it will easily go over all of my lines here. So it won't matter if my lines are a little bit messy. And I can afford to lean a bit heavier, as I said, once I get a bit more sure of where things are going. But that lovely soft pastel medium will still cover over these lines, no problem. So now that I've got the teapot roughly placed, I can start thinking about how the folds of fabric come out from underneath the teapot. Again, making some adjustments, moving that that main fold there at the front of the fabric over a little bit to the left. Looking at where the fabric comes out from the base of the cylinder in the background. So at this point, when you get a couple of items in, it starts to become a little bit easier because you've got something there to start and measure off. So another thing that you want to practice, and it's much easier to do when you hold the pencil further back from the lead like I'm doing, is those ellipse shapes. And you're going to find ellipses in many, many still lifes. It's a very useful shape. So even just on a scrap piece of paper, take a pencil and practice creating ellipses of different widths, different heights. And I'm always trying to remember that the further back in a composition an item is, the more narrow that ellipse will be. So you're seeing it at more of an angle. So can you see that the ellipse at the top of the canister is a good bit more narrow in our view than the ellipse that creates the top of the cup? And that's because the cup is closer to us, so it's like you can see into the cup a bit more because it's closer to us. So it's good practice to have a go at some ellipses, as they are going to serve you well in your life drawing. So starting to place the cup. Again, doing a little bit of measuring there, I can see that the height of the cup from my angle is quite similar to the height of the opening of the cup, so that ellipse shape at the top. It's a similar height to the body of the cup. And then I want to look at the height of the cup and where the saucer starts up the sides of the cup. Make sure that I've got the saucer starting at the same height on each side of the cup. So the whole method really is just measuring everything off everything else as you go. And your eye will definitely get better at this over time. I'm not the best at it. I don't get a lot of practice doing this. I would love to get more practice at doing this though, because it's really fun to do. I'm often a slave to photo reference in my work, and I love working from photo references. But this is a lot of fun. There is something quite freeing just sitting down in front of some objects and getting them sketched onto a piece of paper. Really does test your eye and your hand and eye coordination especially. So it's definitely something that I recommend doing. You will only improve your skills and as an artist by doing things like this. So now I can start to lean a little bit more heavily with the pastel pencil and just start to define some of those lines a little more. And if you're going to work in soft pastel, I would suggest that you perhaps use a pastel pencil rather than a regular graphite or lead pencil. You want to use a similar medium to what you're going to use on top of that. So with soft pastel, it's especially good if you're using a similar type of medium, because then you won't see your lines through the pastel later on. It'll cover over quite nicely. If I used some regular drawing pencil here, there's a good chance that you'd still be able to see some of my lines through the soft pastel later on. I was going to use some willow charcoal at the beginning. I love sketching with charcoal, and that would also mix okay with the soft pastel. But once I got the pastel pencil in my hand, I just continued with that really. So just marking in the handle of the teapot. Ignore any ornamentation to begin with. Just go for the bigger shapes. And you can come back and add those details later on when you're happy with the big shapes. So again, just reassessing my ellipse at the top of the canister, realizing that it's a little bit deeper. I can see more of the top of the canister than I had. So just constantly reassessing, making minor adjustments. And of course you can still make some adjustments in your painting stages, but I'm hoping that I'll have it pretty close to how I want it, so that when I pick up the colour I can just go with that. And of course this is by no means perfect, but when drawing from life I'm kind of happy to let things have a little bit of their own style. And I'm not too worried if things go a little bit askew or a little bit wonky. To me, it sort of gives a little bit more life to the piece. And that's often what I love about still life paintings when I see them. So a nice change of pace for me working on something like this. And if you haven't already, please do go back and check out my first video in this series, which is showing you how to actually set up a still life like this. It's so simple to set up something really effective in your own studio. But if you do want to work along with me on this particular one, I have released the high quality versions of the photo reference from this on my Patreon channel. You can download them from there. Get a little bit more instruction from me over there, and you're welcome to work along with me on this. So the next video in this series will show the painting stages. Now that I have my line drawing done, I'll be making a start on the colour work next. Always the part that I really look forward to, but I've got to say I really do enjoy a bit of drawing from life as well, so this part has been a lot of fun too. So with the 3 objects in now, I just start to look more closely at the folds in the fabric. Just plotting them in a little bit better. And I always like when you've got some fabric in a still life and it drapes over the front of a table, in this case my work desk. Just really gives the painting that idea of being 3D. So that's often a good trick to include in your still life. So very nearly there with this now. That lovely tall bit of fabric to the background. Just marking in quite loosely where some of the folds go. But I hope that this video might inspire you to have a go and to give you some tips on where to start. So that's me pretty much done with this part. Let's have a look at the finished drawing before I start the colour work. So that's my line drawing pretty much done. It's by no means perfect in terms of the perspective of everything, but if you're experimenting with working from life, then you're going to find that it's tricky to do because If you change your viewpoint ever so slightly of what you're seeing, then all of the angles and perspectives change too. So I've tried to be quick about it, and whilst I normally really go for photorealism, I've tried not to do that here. I've really tried to just go for it and get the perspectives in as best as I could. So I hope that you've enjoyed seeing this. I will come back soon and start the colour work. But if you have enjoyed this, then please do subscribe here on my channel for much more like this. And also consider checking me out over on my Patreon channel, where you will find a full catalogue of in-depth tutorials and lots more help in soft pastel. First time I'm making a still life tutorial, and I'm enjoying it so much. I hope there will be a few more to come. So until next time, happy pasteling or drawing or whatever medium you're using. Thanks for watching.